Ryan walked into the conference room like he owned the place. Well, technically he did. His family's construction company had been building shopping centers and office towers for 30 years, and now it was his turn to run things. At 29, he was the youngest CEO in the company's history, and he had something to prove. He dropped his phone on the polished table and finally looked up at the woman standing by the projector. She was probably in her early 30s, wearing a plain navy jacket and holding an old leather folder that had seen better days. Her shoes were practical, not designer. No fancy jewelry, no expensive briefcase. Ryan had seen 100 architects like her before, fresh faces with big dreams and tiny portfolios, hoping to catch a break with a major company. This meeting was a mistake. His assistant had scheduled it without asking him first, probably feeling sorry for this woman who'd been calling the office for weeks. Ryan had already made up his mind. He needed someone serious for the riverfront project, someone with a real reputation, not someone who looked like they just graduated last year. "Let's make this quick," Ryan said, glancing at his watch. "I've got another meeting at 2. The woman smiled slightly, the kind of smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course. Thank you for seeing me. My name is Diana, and I'd like to show you what I'm thinking for your riverfront development." She clicked the remote, and the first image appeared on the screen. It was beautiful, Ryan had to admit. A curved building that seemed to flow like water, with green terraces and open spaces. Very artistic, very impractical. "As you can see," Diana continued, "I'm proposing a design that integrates with the natural waterline rather than fighting against it. The building would use solar panels disguised as part of the architectural features, and the terrace gardens would manage rainwater naturally, reducing the need for—" "Oh, stop," Ryan interrupted, leaning back in his chair. "This is very pretty, but let's be realistic. Solar panels, garden terraces, do you know how much that costs? My investors want a building that makes money, not a science project." Diana paused, her hand still on the remote. "I understand your concern about costs, but if you look at the long-term savings—" "Long-term savings," Ryan cut her off again, "are just another way of saying expensive up front. Look, I appreciate you coming in, but I need someone with experience. Someone who's done this before. No offense, but I'm guessing this is one of your first major projects?" Something flickered across Diana's face, but her voice stayed calm. "I've completed several major projects, actually, but I understand if you're looking for a different approach." "It's not personal," Ryan said, standing up. He wanted to be clear but not cruel. "You've got talent, I can see that. But this project is too important. I need someone established, someone with a proven track record. The city council is watching this closely, and I can't take risks with experimental ideas." Diana nodded slowly. She gathered her materials, closing her worn portfolio with careful movements. "I appreciate your honesty," she said, and there was something in her tone that Ryan couldn't quite read. Not anger exactly. Maybe disappointment, or maybe something else. "I hope you find what you're looking for," Diana added, and then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Ryan sat back down and pulled out his phone. He had 45 minutes before his meeting with Harrison and Associates, a big architectural firm with offices in 5 cities. Now that was the kind of partner he needed: established, reliable, safe. His assistant knocked and entered, wearing an odd expression. "Mr. Ryan, did you know who that was?" "Some architect looking for work," Ryan said, scrolling through emails. "Why?" "That was Diana Voss. She's—" "I don't really care," Ryan interrupted. "Can you order lunch? I want to be ready for the Harrison meeting." "That's the one that matters." His assistant opened her mouth like she wanted to say something else, then closed it. "Of course. I'll order your usual." After she left, Ryan allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd handled that well, he thought. Firm but fair. That woman, Diana, had taken it professionally. No drama, that was good. He respected that. He spent the next hour reviewing the Harrison portfolio. Impressive buildings, mostly traditional designs. Glass and steel, clean lines. The kind of structures that looked good in business magazines. Exactly what his riverfront project needed. At 2 o'clock sharp, he was in a private dining room at the city's best steakhouse, shaking hands with Thomas Harrison himself. The older man had silver hair and wore a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. This was the kind of professional Ryan wanted to work with. They talked about the project over appetizers. Harrison seemed interested, asking good questions about the location and Ryan's vision. Everything was going perfectly until Harrison's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "Problem?" Ryan asked. Harrison set down his fork. "I'm afraid I need to be straight with you, Ryan. I was planning to have my lead architect handle your project, but she's just given notice. She's leaving the firm to work independently. Can't someone else take over?" Ryan suggested. "You've got a whole team, right?" "Not like her," Harrison said, shaking his head. "She's been the driving force behind every major project we've done for the past 5 years. Honestly, without her, I don't feel confident taking on something as high profile as your riverfront development." Ryan felt a twist of concern. "Who is this architect? Maybe I could talk to her directly. Convince her to stay on for this project." Harrison gave him a long look. "Diana Voss, she's the best in the business. 3-time winner of the National Design Award. Her sustainable building in Chicago was on the cover of every architecture magazine last year. She's got a waiting list 2 years long." He paused. "Actually, I'm surprised you haven't heard of her. She's kind of a legend in our field." The room suddenly felt very small. Ryan's ears were ringing. "Diana Voss," he repeated slowly. "Yes, why? Do you know her?" Ryan couldn't speak for a moment. His mind was racing back to an hour ago, to the woman with the worn portfolio and the practical shoes, the woman he'd dismissed without even looking at her credentials, the woman he'd interrupted and talked down to like she was a beginner. "I met her this morning," Ryan finally managed to say. "She came to my office." Harrison's eyebrows shot up. "She came to you?" "Diana doesn't usually pursue clients. They come to her." "You must have really impressed her somehow," he chuckled. "Lucky man." "I hope you signed her." Ryan couldn't respond. He stared at his untouched steak, feeling sick. His assistant had tried to tell him. The odd look on her face, the way she'd started to say something. She'd known who Diana was. She'd probably sent him Diana's full credentials in that email he'd ignored because he'd been too busy to read it. He'd just made the biggest mistake of his career, and he had no idea how to fix it. Ryan barely slept that night. He kept replaying the meeting in his head, remembering every dismissive word he'd said, every time he'd interrupted Diana, the way he'd looked at his watch like she was wasting his precious time. At 3 a.m, he was sitting in his kitchen with his laptop searching her name. The results were overwhelming. Page after page of awards featured projects, interviews in major design magazines. There was Diana accepting a trophy at some international architecture ceremony, Diana giving a speech at a university, Diana standing in front of a stunning eco-friendly building in Seattle that had apparently changed the way people thought about sustainable design. One article called her the most innovative architect of her generation. Another described how she'd turned down a project for a billionaire because his vision didn't align with her values. There were videos of her explaining complex environmental systems in ways that made perfect sense. Her passion for creating buildings that actually helped communities instead of just looking impressive. Ryan clicked on an interview from 6 months ago. The host asked Diana about dealing with difficult clients. She smiled that same slight smile Ryan had seen in his conference room and said, "I've learned that the first 5 minutes of meeting someone tells you everything. If they don't respect you from the start, they won't respect you 6 months into a project. Respect isn't something people turn on and off for important people. It's either there or it isn't." Ryan closed his laptop. He felt like he'd been punched in the stomach. The next morning, he was at his office before sunrise. He found the email his assistant had sent about Diana's appointment. The one he'd ignored. Right there in the subject line it said, "Meeting with Diana Voss, National Design Award winner." His assistant had even attached a PDF with Diana's credentials, her portfolio, letters of recommendation from people Ryan would have killed to work with. He'd ignored it all because he was too busy, too sure of himself, too convinced that anyone who came to him must be beneath him. Ryan picked up his phone and called Diana's office. It went to voicemail. He left a message trying to sound professional but probably just sounding desperate. "Hi, this is Ryan from Westfield Development. I'd like to apologize for yesterday and discuss the riverfront project further. Please call me back at your earliest convenience." He waited all day. No call back. The next morning he tried again. This time someone answered. A polite assistant with a voice that somehow managed to sound both friendly and completely impersonal. "Ms. Voss's office, how may I help you?" "This is Ryan from Westfield Development. I'd like to schedule a meeting with Diana. I'm afraid Ms. Voss's calendar is fully booked for the next several months. Would you like me to add you to the waiting list? Several months? Ryan couldn't keep the desperation out of his voice. This is urgent. I need to speak with her about a project. I understand, sir. Unfortunately, Ms. Voss receives numerous requests each week. I can take your information and someone will reach out if there's an opening. Ryan left his details, knowing it was pointless. He was just another name on a very long list now. He tried sending an email directly to Diana's business address. The response came from her assistant within an hour. A perfectly professional note thanking him for his interest and informing him that Ms. Voss was currently committed to existing projects. In a moment of panic, Ryan ordered an expensive bouquet of flowers and had them delivered to Diana's office with a card apologizing for his behavior. 2 days later, he saw on the local hospital's social media page that Diana Voss had donated a beautiful flower arrangement to their children's ward. The post included a gracious thank you note from Diana. The message was clear. She didn't want anything from him. A week passed. Then 2 weeks. Ryan's riverfront project was stuck in limbo. The city council kept asking when they'd see more detailed plans. His father called from retirement in Florida, having heard through the business grapevine that Ryan had somehow offended the Voss woman and wanted to know what his son had been thinking. Do you know how many developers would kill to work with her? His father said, not bothering to hide his disappointment. She could be working with anyone. And you insulted her? Ryan tried hiring other firms. They were all interested until they heard about the project's scope and timeline. One architect was honest with him. Look, the city council already saw Diana Voss's preliminary sketches. You showed them what's possible. Now they won't settle for anything less. You need her, not us. Out of options and growing desperate, Ryan did something he never did. He actually researched someone beyond a quick internet search. He read every article about Diana he could find. He watched hour-long lectures she'd given at architecture schools. He studied her projects in detail, really looking at them this time instead of dismissing them as too artistic. What he discovered shocked him. Diana hadn't come from money or privilege. She'd grown up in a working-class neighborhood, the daughter of a single mother who cleaned offices at night. She'd worked 3 jobs to pay for architecture school. Her first major break came when she won a design competition at 25, and even then, established firms had tried to take credit for her work. She'd fought her way up in a field that didn't always welcome women, especially women who insisted on doing things differently. And she'd won not by compromising her values but by being so undeniably talented that people had no choice but to pay attention. Ryan found one interview particularly painful to read. Diana talked about a meeting early in her career where a potential client had treated her like an intern, not even bothering to look at her portfolio before dismissing her ideas. I learned an important lesson that day, she said. Never work with people who don't see your value from the beginning. Because if they don't respect you when they need you, they definitely won't respect you when things get difficult. Ryan realized with horrible clarity that he'd become the exact kind of person Diana had learned to avoid. He wasn't just another potential client she'd turned down. He was a reminder of every dismissive executive who'd underestimated her, every time someone had judged her by her appearance instead of her work. 3 weeks after their disastrous meeting, Ryan's assistant knocked on his door. The city council wants an update on the riverfront project. They're expecting Diana Voss's firm to be involved. What should I tell them? Ryan stared at his desk. The project that was supposed to prove he could lead the company was falling apart, and it was entirely his fault. He'd had one of the best architects in the world sitting in his conference room, and he'd treated her like she didn't matter. Tell them, Ryan said quietly, that we're still finalizing the team. It was a lie and they both knew it. But Ryan wasn't ready to admit defeat. Not yet. There had to be some way to fix this. There had to be. Ryan wasn't much for charity events. He usually sent a check and called it a day. But when his mother called and practically begged him to attend the Urban Housing Initiative Gala, he couldn't say no. She was on the organizing committee, and apparently his empty seat would be noticed. So there he was on a Friday night, wearing an uncomfortable tuxedo and making small talk with people he barely knew. The ballroom was decorated with photos of affordable housing projects and community gardens. Speeches droned on about creating inclusive cities and supporting underserved neighborhoods. Ryan nodded politely and checked his phone whenever he thought no one was looking. He was planning his escape when he saw her. Diana was across the room, laughing at something the mayor had just said. She wore a simple black dress and looked completely at ease, like she belonged there in a way Ryan never quite felt at these events. The mayor was gesturing enthusiastically while Diana listened, and several city council members had gathered around them like she was the most interesting person in the room. Which, Ryan realized, she probably was. He watched as Diana pulled out her phone and showed the mayor something on the screen. Whatever it was made the mayor's eyes light up. They talked for another few minutes, Diana sketching something in the air with her hands and the mayor nodding eagerly. This was her world, Ryan understood. These were her people. Not corporate developers trying to maximize profit, but folks who actually cared about making cities better for everyone. Ryan turned to leave. He had no business interrupting her evening, no right to insert himself into her conversation. He'd made his bed with his arrogance, and now he had to lie in it. But as he headed toward the exit, he glanced back one more time. Diana was looking directly at him. Their eyes met across the crowded ballroom, and for a moment neither of them moved. Ryan's heart hammered in his chest. He wanted to disappear, to pretend he hadn't seen her, to avoid the confrontation he deserved. Instead, Diana excused herself from the mayor and walked toward him. Ryan's mouth went dry. He'd rehearsed apologies 100 times in his head, but now that she was standing in front of him, everything he'd planned to say vanished. "Mr. Ryan," Diana said, her voice neutral, "I didn't expect to see you here." "My mother," he managed to say, then cleared his throat. "She's on the committee. She insisted I come. That's nice of you to support her work." Diana's tone was polite, perfectly professional, and somehow that made Ryan feel worse than if she'd been openly angry with him. "Diana, Ryan started, then stopped. Where did he even begin? "I owe you an apology. A real one. What I did in that meeting was inexcusable. I judged you without knowing anything about you. I didn't even look at your credentials. I was arrogant and dismissive, and you deserved so much better than that." Diana studied him for a long moment. Her expression was hard to read. Not cold exactly, but cautious, like she was trying to decide if his words meant anything. "I appreciate you saying that," she finally said. "I've spent the last month trying to reach you," Ryan continued. "Not just because I need an architect, though I do, but because I genuinely want to apologize for how I treated you. You came to my office with incredible ideas, and I couldn't see past my own assumptions." "What changed?" Diana asked. "Why do you see it differently now?" It was a fair question, and Ryan knew he needed to answer honestly. "Thomas Harrison told me who you were. At first I was just embarrassed that I'd made such a huge mistake. But then I started reading about your work, really reading about it. I learned about where you came from, what you've accomplished, the buildings you've designed, and I realized something." He paused, trying to find the right words. "I realized that even if you weren't famous, even if you hadn't won those awards, I still should have treated you with respect. The way I acted had nothing to do with your qualifications and everything to do with my own issues. I judged you based on absolutely nothing, and that's not the kind of person I want to be." Something shifted in Diana's expression. Not quite forgiveness, but maybe a crack in the wall she'd put up. "Most people don't admit that kind of thing." "Most people are smarter than me," Ryan said with a weak smile. "Look, I know I don't deserve a second chance. I know you have a waiting list of clients who actually respect you from day one, but I want you to know that meeting you, even briefly, changed something for me. You made me realize I've been operating on autopilot, making assumptions, not really seeing people. That's on me to fix whether you ever work with me or not." Diana was quiet for a moment. Around them the gala continued, people laughing and clinking glasses, but Ryan felt like they were in their own bubble. "Can I ask you something?" Diana said. "What do you actually want to build with that riverfront project? Not what your investors want, not what you think will make the most money. What do you want to create?" The question caught Ryan off guard. No one had ever asked him that before. Everyone always wanted to know about timelines, budgets, return on investment. But what did he actually want to build? "I don't know," he admitted. "I've been so focused on making it profitable and impressive that I never stopped to think about what it should really be." "That's honest," Diana said. She seemed to consider something, then made a decision. "The riverfront isn't just land to develop. There's a whole community there. People who've lived in those neighborhoods for generations. When you build something new, You're not just creating a building. You're changing people's lives. Sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. I never thought about it that way, Ryan said quietly. I know. That's why I left your office. Diana's voice was gentle but firm. I don't work with people who see developments as just business deals. The buildings I design have to mean something. They have to serve the people who will use them, not just the people who will profit from them. Ryan nodded slowly. Everything she said made sense, and it made him feel small for never considering any of it before. If you're serious about learning, Diana continued, about really understanding what that riverfront means to people, then maybe we can talk. Not about working together, not yet, but about what responsible development actually looks like. I'd like that, Ryan said, hardly daring to believe she was giving him any kind of chance. What do I need to do? Diana pulled out her phone and typed something quickly. Ryan's phone buzzed with a message. There's a community center in the riverfront neighborhood. They're having a meeting next Tuesday about the development plans. Go, listen. Don't pitch anything, don't make promises. Just listen to what people are worried about. I'll be there, Ryan promised. We'll see, Diana said, but there was the smallest hint of a smile on her face. People can surprise you, Mr. Ryan. Sometimes they grow, sometimes they don't. She turned and walked back to the mayor, leaving Ryan standing there with something he hadn't felt in weeks. Not quite hope, but maybe the beginning of it. A chance to prove he could be better than the person who'd walked into that conference room 5 weeks ago. Ryan showed up at the community center 15 minutes early on Tuesday. The building was old, probably built in the 70s, with faded paint and a parking lot full of potholes. Inside, folding chairs were arranged in a circle, and a coffee station sat in the corner with mismatched mugs and store-brand cookies on paper plates. This wasn't the kind of place Ryan usually spent his time. His meetings happened in boardrooms with catered lunch and presentations on huge screens. But he'd promised Diana he'd come, so here he was, feeling completely out of place in his business casual clothes while everyone else wore jeans and work uniforms. An older woman with kind eyes and gray hair pulled back in a ponytail welcomed him at the door. First time here? I'm Patricia. I run the center. Ryan, he said, shaking her hand. I'm here for the meeting about the riverfront development. Patricia's smile tightened just a little. You're the developer. I am, Ryan admitted, feeling like he should apologize just for existing. Well, thank you for coming, Patricia said, though her tone suggested she'd believe his sincerity when she saw it. Grab some coffee and have a seat. We're starting in a few minutes. Ryan poured himself a cup and sat down. People filed in slowly, a young mother with a toddler on her hip, an elderly man with a cane, a teenager in a fast food uniform who looked exhausted, a couple who owned the corner grocery store, about 20 people total, all looking at Ryan with varying degrees of suspicion. Patricia called the meeting to order. Thank you all for coming. As you know, we're here to discuss the proposed riverfront development. Mr. Ryan, the developer, has joined us tonight to hear your concerns. I want to remind everyone to be respectful but also honest. This is your community, and you have a right to speak up. A man in his 50s raised his hand immediately. He introduced himself as Carlos and said he'd lived in the neighborhood for 30 years. I want to know what happens to us when you build your fancy condos. My rent's already gone up twice in 3 years. How much higher is it going to go when rich people start moving in? Ryan opened his mouth to give his standard response about market forces and economic development, but stopped himself. Diana had said to listen, not pitch. So he just said, that's a valid concern. Tell me more about what you're experiencing. Carlos seemed surprised by the response, but continued. My daughter, she works 2 jobs and can barely afford her apartment. If rents keep going up, she'll have to move out of the neighborhood where she grew up, where her kids go to school. That's not right, others chimed in. The young mother talked about how the local daycare was affordable because the building's rent was reasonable. But if the landlord saw property values rising, who knew what would happen? The elderly man worried about being priced out of the neighborhood where he'd lived for 40 years. The teenager spoke quietly about how there weren't enough safe places for kids to hang out. And new developments never seemed to include anything for young people. The grocery store owners had a different concern. We've been here 23 years, the wife said. We know everyone's names. We give credit to families when money's tight. But when these big developments go up, chain stores move in. We can't compete with their prices. We'll lose our business. Ryan listened to all of it, taking notes on his phone. Not the kind of notes he usually took about profit margins and construction timelines, but real concerns from real people. A woman named Lisa talked about how her community garden might get demolished. A father worried about increased traffic near the elementary school. A young artist mentioned how the neighborhood's character was already changing. Becoming sterile and expensive. I have to ask, an older woman finally said, looking directly at Ryan, "Why are you here?" Developers don't usually care what we think. They do what they want, make their money, and leave us to deal with the consequences. It was a hard question, but fair. Ryan thought about giving a polished answer, but something Diana had said stuck with him. Buildings change people's lives. These were the lives he'd be changing. Honestly, Ryan said, I'm here because someone made me realize I've been doing this all wrong. I've been thinking about developments as projects, as buildings, as investments. I haven't been thinking about the people who actually live in these neighborhoods. And that was wrong. So what are you going to do differently? Carlos asked, his tone skeptical but not hostile. I don't know yet, Ryan admitted, but I'm starting to understand that whatever I build needs to work for you, not just for my company. I can't promise I have all the answers right now, but I promise I'm listening. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Afterward, Patricia invited Ryan to stay and help fold up chairs. As they worked, she said, "You surprised me tonight. Most developers would have spent the whole time defending their plans or making promises they won't keep." I didn't have any promises to make, Ryan said. Everything I thought I knew about this project was wrong. Will you come back? Patricia asked. Next Tuesday, same time. We meet every week, Ryan didn't hesitate. I'll be here. He came back the next Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that. Over the following weeks, he helped Patricia organize a youth basketball program. He met more families, learned more names, heard more stories. A single dad working nights to support his kids. An immigrant family running a small restaurant. A retired teacher who volunteered at the library. Ryan started seeing the neighborhood not as a location for development, but as a living community with its own history and heart. He walked the streets, ate at the local restaurants, visited the shops. He saw what would be lost if he built the wrong thing. On his 4th visit to the community center, Diana was there. She was sitting with a group of teenagers, looking at sketches they'd drawn of their ideal neighborhood. Ryan watched from the doorway as she encouraged them, asked questions, treated their ideas with the same seriousness she'd probably give to a major client. When the meeting ended, Diana walked over to him. Patricia told me you've been coming every week. I promised I would, Ryan said, and what have you learned? Ryan thought about everything he'd heard, all the conversations that had challenged his assumptions. I learned that I don't know anything about building communities. I only knew how to build buildings. There's a huge difference, Diana nodded slowly. There is. Most people never figure that out. I also learned, Ryan continued, that the project I was planning would have destroyed something valuable. These people have built something here. It's not perfect, but it's theirs. And I almost bulldozed it without even noticing. What are you going to do about it? Diana asked. I was hoping, Ryan said carefully, that you might help me figure that out. Not as someone I hire to make my project look good, but as a partner who can help me build something that actually serves these people. I know I don't deserve your time or your talent, but they do. Diana looked at him for a long moment. Let me think about it, she finally said. But Ryan, if we do this, we do it right. That means affordable housing, protected spaces for local businesses, community facilities that people actually need. Your investors won't like it. Your board will push back. Are you ready for that fight? Ryan thought about Carlos and his daughter, about Lisa's community garden, about Patricia and the teenagers with their dreams. Yes, he said. I am. Diana pulled out her phone. Come to my office Friday morning. Bring everything you know about the site. So the budget, the restrictions. And bring an open mind. We have a lot of work to do. As Ryan drove home that night, he felt something he hadn't felt in months. Not the anxiety of a failing project or the shame of his mistakes, but genuine excitement about building something that mattered. Friday morning, Ryan walked into Diana's office with 3 binders full of information and a nervous energy he hadn't felt since his first day of college. Her office was nothing like he'd expected. No marble floors or floor-to-ceiling windows. Instead, it was a converted warehouse space with exposed brick, plants everywhere, and walls covered in sketches and photographs of communities she'd worked with. Diana was already at a large work table, spreading out drawings and aerial photos of the riverfront neighborhood. She looked up when he entered and gestured to a chair. "Coffee's over there if you want some. Let's get started." For the next 4 hours they worked. Diana asked questions Ryan had never considered. Not about square footage or return on investment, but about sightlines and gathering spaces, about how people would move through the area, about preserving the things that made the neighborhood special while adding what it needed. "The grocery store Carlos's neighbors run," Diana said, pointing to the map. "It needs to stay. Not just because they deserve to keep their business, but because it's a community hub. People stop there, chat, check on each other. You can't replicate that with a chain store." Ryan nodded, making notes. "What about the rent? If property values go up, their landlord might force them out anyway." "That's where you come in," Diana said. "You buy the building, lock in a long-term lease at a rate they can afford, build it into your budget from the start. Yes, it means less profit, but it means preserving something valuable." They talked about affordable housing. Really affordable, not the kind developers called affordable but regular people couldn't actually afford. Diana showed him models from other cities where mixed-income housing worked, where families at different economic levels lived side by side, creating diverse, stable communities instead of exclusive enclaves. "Your investors will hate this," Diana warned. "This isn't a maximum profit project. This is a good project that makes reasonable profit while actually serving people." "I know," Ryan said. "Let them hate it. I'm tired of building things that only rich people can enjoy." Over the next 3 months, Ryan and Diana worked together almost daily. They held community meetings where residents gave input on the design. Teenagers helped plan a youth center. Patricia advised on family-friendly spaces. Local artists contributed ideas for public art installations. The board meeting was exactly as terrible as Ryan expected. His father flew in from Florida specifically for it, and the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. 40% affordable housing? One board member practically shouted. "That's financial suicide." "Protected rent rates for existing businesses?" Another added. "Why would we limit our own income?" Ryan stood his ground. "Because this isn't just about maximum profit. It's about building something sustainable, something the community actually wants and needs." "The community doesn't pay our bills," the first board member shot back. "No, but they're the ones who have to live with what we build," Ryan said firmly. "And if we build something that destroys their neighborhood, we're not developers. We're just parasites." The room went silent. Ryan's father leaned back in his chair, studying his son with an expression Ryan couldn't quite read. "Show us the numbers," his father finally said. Ryan pulled up the detailed financial projections Diana had helped him prepare. Yes, the profit margin was lower than a typical luxury development, but it was still profitable, still viable, and the long-term community benefits would actually increase property values sustainably, rather than creating a boom and bust cycle. "This project will take longer to show returns," Ryan admitted. "But it will show returns, and more importantly, it will be something we can be proud of, something that makes the city better, not just our bank accounts bigger." The vote was close, but it passed. Barely. Ryan knew he'd spent considerable political capital, knew some board members would be watching for him to fail. But Diana squeezed his shoulder as they left the meeting, and that somehow made it worth it. Construction took 18 months. Throughout the process, Ryan and Diana worked with community members, adjusting plans when needed, incorporating feedback, staying true to the vision they'd created together. It wasn't always smooth. There were budget overruns and construction delays, and moments when Ryan wondered if he'd made a huge mistake. But then he'd visit the site and see Carlos talking excitedly about the affordable unit he'd be moving into, or watch Patricia planning programs for the new community center, or hear the grocery store owners talking about their secured lease, and he'd remember why this mattered. The day the project officially opened, the whole neighborhood showed up. Not the fancy ribbon-cutting ceremony Ryan's company usually held, but a real block party with music and food and kids running around. Diana had designed the central plaza to be exactly this kind of gathering space, and seeing it full of life, full of the people it was built for, made every difficult moment worth it. Ryan stood back, watching it all. His father approached, holding a plate of food from the local restaurants that now had spaces in the development. "You did good, son," his father said quietly. "Better than good. When I started this company, I told myself I was building things that mattered. But somewhere along the way, I forgot what that meant." "You remembered." Or maybe you figured it out for the first time. Diana taught me, Ryan said, spotting her across the plaza talking with a group of residents. I almost missed the chance to learn, but you didn't, his father said. You could have doubled down on being wrong. A lot of people do. Instead, you admitted your mistake and did the work to fix it. That takes character. Diana caught Ryan's eye across the crowd and waved him over. He excused himself and made his way through the celebration, stopping to shake hands and accept congratulations from people who'd become more than just residents of a neighborhood he was developing. They'd become people he knew, people he cared about. Look at this, Diana said when he reached her, gesturing at the full plaza. The children playing in the fountain she'd designed. The elderly folks sitting on benches watching the world go by. The young families exploring their new homes. This is what architecture should be. Not just buildings, but communities. We did this together, Ryan said. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Without you teaching me what really matters. You did the hard part, Diana replied. You changed. Not everyone can do that. 3 years later, the Riverfront project had won multiple awards for community-centered design. Other cities were using it as a model. Diana's firm was busier than ever, and Ryan had shifted his entire company's approach to focus on developments that served communities rather than just extracting profit from them. But the award Ryan was most proud of wasn't from an architecture magazine or a business journal. It was a handmade plaque from Patricia and the community center, thanking him for listening, for learning, and for caring enough to do things right. He kept it on his desk, right next to a photo from that first block party. In the picture, Diana was laughing at something someone had said, surrounded by happy residents in the space they'd created together. It reminded Ryan every day of the person he'd almost missed knowing, the lessons he'd almost failed to learn, and the community he'd almost destroyed with his arrogance. He'd misjudged her completely, but she'd given him a chance to grow. And that chance had changed everything, not just for his business, but for the kind of person he wanted to be. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to us is being wrong and having someone care enough to show us a better way.